Boom shakalaka, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters around the world. It is your boy Christial, aka the Esoteric Noetic, aka the Chocolate Nubian Soul Brother. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, click on the bell, tell your friends, tell your mom, drop some comments, let us know what it is. First of all, thank you everyone for sharing these videos, getting the word out there, dropping the wisdomatic truth bombs. I salute you. All right, let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk about what some of the spiritual leaders are saying about this pandemic. I mean, you would expect that spiritual people, with their enlightenment and their wisdom, they would have an understanding of sovereignty, right? An understanding of perhaps some of the agendas that are at play, because they can see through the veil of illusion that these governments are creating. They can see through the machinations, the dastardly plans of these satanic entities, right? But more often than not, you find so many of these spiritual hippies, these enlightened figures, they utter the same platitudes of these drones, of the normies. Oh, look, we got to do the right thing. We all need to work together as one, because we are one and the same, and by staying apart, we stay together, because that is how we bring about the age of Aquarius and work together to unite the world. We all got to come together as one, globalization, and have no individuality. You and I are the same thing. And I'm sure some of you have had conversations with spiritual figures, right? Your hippie friends that tell you that you're being selfish, and they often try to shroud their arguments around a spiritual idea, that this is what God wants. The problem with a lot of spiritual figures, a lot of spiritual people, I would say, is that, look, they're definitely coming from a place of compassion and love, and that's half of spirituality, to be awoken, to allow your Christ light to shine through, which is about compassion and love. Was that not what Jesus Christ, Buddha, Krishna, so many of these figures were about? Compassion and understanding? Absolutely. Agape, unconditional love. But there is a right to the left. There is a feminine to the masculine. There is balance. And more often than not, I find these people are far too, what I would call right brain imbalance. They're thinking from a place of emotions and heart-centered thinking. However, they have not balanced this with reason and logic, which is the masculine principle. The masculine needs the feminine needs the masculine. It's called the alchemical wedding, the alchemy of opposites, and you need to find synthesis between these schools. And essentially, people, I find, a lot of these spiritual leaders don't believe in the concept of sovereignty, don't understand that, granted, we should all be working compassionately, but we cannot force our will on others. I mean, the entire idea of human rights is that, granted, we should all work together, try to work together, and encourage others to show compassion and love. Once you start forcing people to do things under this idea that it is for the greater good, then you have set the path to violence. The ends do not justify the means. This is the fundamental seed of philosophy, that regardless of what you want in society, if you are willing to force people to do it when they are harming no one else, this is the universal rule, the golden rule, then you become the aggressor, you become the bad person. But I find a lot of spiritual leaders tend to lose sight of this idea, and they advocate for things like forcing people to wear masks, forcing people to surrender their freedoms, their own sovereignty. It's one thing if you want to do it for yourself. That's altruistic. But once you force others to do that, forced altruism, that is no longer altruistic. That is just plain immoral. Anyway, let's have a look at what some of the spiritual leaders have to say in regards to this pandemic. Let's start off with the Dalai Lama. All right, here we go. So, ladies and gentlemen, the Dalai Lama tweeted not long ago and said, "Sometimes a small harsh action can be helpful in averting or overcoming a great disaster." True, true, true. For example, a small amount of a toxic substance can have medicinal value. Yes, beautiful concept. But the distinction between that scenario is that it's voluntary. If someone wants to give you a substance that you don't like, and it's going to do a lot of good, provided you accept that, no foul. But when someone wants to force you to take a substance because they think they know what is best for you, then we're moving into tricky territory, because we as human beings are not infallible, and sometimes what we think is going to be the best for someone is not necessarily the best for them, because a lot of times people have different ideas of what is good and what is bad. This is why we have this whole concept of the universality of rights, that provide you can do whatever you want, just don't harm someone directly. As soon as you start playing this game where it's acceptable to force things onto people when they're not doing any harm because you know what's best for them, because you know what is good, what is going to be valuable to them, then you're moving into tricky territory. Ends justifies the means territory, which is antithetical to justice, because it allows you to essentially justify anything. Anyway, Mr. Lama, so I like that, Mr. Lama, goes on to say, so to achieve the greater good or to control otherwise difficult people, taking some tough action may be helpful, but it is important that it should be motivated by kindness and compassion, not by anger or contempt. Seems like the Dalai Lama is a student of the greater good. Now, granted, look, I don't want to make any assumptions here, but I think it's very clear, and this is one of the things that a lot of these leaders do. They speak in airy-fairy terms, so they can often go back on what they're saying. You know, you speak in ambivalence. This is what politicians do. I believe that we all need to work together, and we may need to do difficult things initially, and we may all need to do some uncomfortable things, but it's all in the interests of being an American or being Australian. You got to do the right thing. Do the right thing. We're all in this together, mate. What does that mean? What do you mean, Dalai Lama? Are you telling us that we should force other people to sacrifice themselves because of the greater good? And I think clearly that's what he's alluding to over here. He may not have specifically said so, but I think anyone that even has half a brain cell can figure that essentially he's making the argument it's acceptable to force people, what does he say? In order to achieve the greater good, taking some tough action may be helpful. What does that mean? Forcing people to wear masks, forcing people to vaccinate people, it could be helpful. Maybe. Doesn't make it right. And this is the problem with this kind of thinking, that you are assuming that you know what is best for someone. It reminds me of the parable of the farmer, a classic Chinese tale. And because all of this comes down to this idea of good intentions, that you know that by forcing people to get vaccinated, by forcing people to mask up, it's going to save lives. Isn't this what our leaders tell us? It's a little cost. We could save so much based off of these heuristic models that they're always alluding to. We can reduce, we could save thousands of lives. You don't know that. You don't know that. I'm sure the Nazis, yes, it always comes down to Goffman's law. In fact, they made the argument that if we can just get rid of the Jews, we can make this nation and the entire world so much better. We can save so many people. Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, they had the same kind of reasoning. Genghis Khan had this idea that by bringing the entire world under one control, that he could bring about so much good. Of course, he killed millions of people, anywhere from 30 million to 70 million people in order to achieve that, but it was all for the greater good. Alexander the Great, same mentality. Let's take over all these countries and bring them under one leadership to have unity. Doesn't matter about all the thousands of people that are going to die. They're going to be forced to do that. And of course, there are always untold consequences. These masks. Oh, look, masks are not going to have any negative consequences. What do we find? Oh, it causes strep throat. Causes smelly mouth, which can lead to strokes, heart attacks. Causes a range of other illnesses. And the list will continue to pile up. Not to mention the psychological effects this is going to have on our children. I think we're going to reach a point where, and I alluded to this in my last video, that 2020 is going to mark the point at which society shall see this defining moment between, it'll basically be BC, before coronavirus. And we'll see that the generation from this era will be a generation that will not be able to to communicate socially. The social skills will be lacking because we'll all be wearing these masks, perhaps. They won't know how to read each other's facial cues. We'll be moving into this world where people work in their homes. They don't know how to interact with each other. Therefore, the personal skills, like, can you imagine what courtship is going to be like? And I know a lot of people like this idea. A lot of people in this generation don't even like the idea of approaching a woman, or a woman approaching a man for that matter. I'm not sexist. It's going to work either way. Because, it might be harassment. And look, they might have the coronavirus, so you got to do everything online now on Tinder. Or whatever else you might want to use. But the art of conversation, of seduction, the art of just being a charismatic person, or just enjoying the conversation that you have with a fellow human being, is no longer being able to be explored because, it's inappropriate. And of course, there are all of these measures that have been put in place: facial recognition, loss of privacy, goes on and on and on. This is the new world that we're moving into. Anyway, I digress. The point I was trying to make is a lot of the times we're not aware of the consequences to our actions. And I'm reminded of the parable of the farmer. So this story where there's this Chinese farmer that loses a horse. The villagers come and they say, "Oh no, you've lost your horse. That's terrible." And he says, "Maybe." Next day, the horse comes back with a bunch of other horses. And now the farmer has a bunch of other horses to tend to. And then the villagers come around and they say, "Oh, that's amazing. You have new horses." The farmer says, "Maybe." Next day, the farmer's son comes on, rides the horse, falls off the horse, breaks his leg. "Oh no, terrible, right?" "Maybe," the farmer says. Villagers see, it's clearly terrible. You've lost your son. How could you say that's not a terrible thing? "Maybe." And it goes on. The next day, the popo come down, conscription officers come down and say that, "Look, we're trying to enlist your son in the military." But of course, the farmer's son is not fit for the military because he's broken his leg, fell off the horse. Villagers say, "That's horrible. I mean, that's great, obviously, right?" I don't know. Maybe back then they would have thought it was a great idea to go to war. It all depends on how you look at this thing. But the bottom line is, when you are looking at the future is unknown. Maybe it is good, maybe it is not good. A lot of times, our perception of what is good and bad, or what is good and bad, comes down to our perception of it. And as soon as you play this game where you say, you know what is best for people, you know what their values are, you know what is best for the community, because you are all seeing. Because you are Dan Andrews, you're Dan Christ Andrews, I can see the future. Or you were ScoMo, or you were Biden, or you were any other great leader that has these good intentions, good motivations, and it's always predicated on these good motivations. Now, I'm not saying that all of these leaders have good intentions. I think a lot of them do not. But a lot of the times it comes down to this. It comes down with this idea that you have it within your heart to do the right thing, but because you are not balanced in your thinking, you have not matriculated your energy to your higher centers of consciousness. Because the idea is that once you are working from the heart, you're working from a place of love, consciousness, absolutely. And this is what a lot of spirituality is about. This is why a lot of these leaders are always saying things like, "Oh, we must work together." But once you bring your energy into the higher centers, into your crown, third eye, you start seeing that you cannot just work from a place of love. I mean, granted, love is part of it, but it's also, as in, part of it is heart-centered thinking. But it's also reason, logic, intellect. And the idea of, and this is what the Dalai Lama is advocating for, the idea of saying that people should be forced to sacrifice themselves because you feel that this is the heart thing to do, that leads to this moral relativistic system where essentially people can do anything, where you can justify anything in order to achieve the ends. But the reality is we do not know what the ends are. And I think this guy's response to this tweet by the Dalai Lama really sums it all up. So as long as we have compassion and kindness as we all vaccinate. So as long as we have compassion and kindness as we all vaccinate and take action against difficult people for the greater good, everything's fine and dandy. Gotcha. Fuck off. Yeah, essentially. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you can justify if you believe that you're doing it for the greater good. Well, I believe that we should vaccinate everyone. Stop being so selfish. I believe that we should mask everyone. I believe we should round up all the people that are like dangerous and put them in a concentration camp. I believe we should take all these slaves. I believe that we should take all these slaves from Africa and bring them to United States, and we can take really good care of them. It's a form of neighborliness because we're teaching them how to get along with our fellow men. We're educating them, and by doing so, they get a bit of education. I need to work on my southern accent. But it's the same kind of thinking. And there are so many spiritual leaders, so many of my close friends that advocate for this kind of thinking, do not understand the concept of sovereignty. Do not understand that, granted, yes, you need to be compassionate, but if you move too far into this spectrum of thinking where you do not respect the rights of people, you can justify anything. And it always leads to the worst atrocities, this kind of thinking. Good intentions are not good enough. We need to have a respect for each other. True care. It's not just about what you think is the best for someone. It's about respecting them enough to allow them to make decisions for themselves. This is a huge part of spirituality. Anyway, I wanted to look at one more tweet. This is by Deepak Chopra, another advocate of airy-fairy nonsense, I would say. I think a lot of his views are brilliant. They're insightful. Not this one, though. A lot of them seem to be devoid of reason and logic. You see, a lot of people, once again, come from this attitude of, just show selflessness, always. And that's all good and well. If you want to show selflessness, by all means. But don't force other people to be selfless. You don't understand the circumstances. To tell a mother that she needs to stop taking care of her son or daughter and go and work for the government, be conscripted to serve in the armed forces or something like that, because it's the right thing to do. I mean, that's obviously kind of a crazy thing to say, right? Or I guess a more appropriate scenario is to force someone to take a vaccine, not understanding what their immune system is like. That might do a tremendous amount of harm for them. And not understanding the consequences that this might have on other people. Thinking that this vaccine is going to do a tremendous amount of good because you in your mind, in your arrogance a lot of the times, people think they know what is best for others. But the truest form of humility, which is one of the biggest aspects of spirituality, is to respect other people, to realize that you don't know what's best for someone. So outside of the universality of violence, so we know the things that we definitely do not want done to us. This is the basis of the golden rule. Don't hit, don't steal, don't take other people's shit. Don't use coercion, don't use force, fraud. I mean, outside of this, let people make decisions for themselves. Anyway, I digress. So Deepak Chopra says, wear a mask or join the company. And I think essentially saying, and I think it's pretty clear here, those that don't wear a mask are part of this oligarch system that wants to essentially erode this beautiful environment, this beautiful planet. The company is, I think in the eyes of the Dalai Lama, the man, the problem, the system, systemic racism, this corrupt capitalist system that just wants to eat and eat and eat and feed and feed and feed itself. And look, no doubt there are problems to the current system. I think unless, of course, we have a balance of compassion and love, something that needs to be fostered within all of us, regardless of whether or not we are living in a society that has freedom, we will never arrive at harmony. But we cannot arrive at this through force. Ends do not justify the means. And this is the problem. It all comes down to this kind of thinking. Most of the leaders, most of the governments, and a lot of the spiritual leaders are advocating for this kind of thinking. Oh, you're being selfish, heart. It's devoid of reason and logic. What are you even saying? That you know exactly what is going to happen if people start wearing masks? You don't know that. The future is unknown. Yes, we should be mindful of the future.
You must be mindful of the future, but not at the cost of the present.
Master Yoda once said. The future is unknown. And by Deepak Chopra saying that we should, you can either wear a mask or join the company, I think he's very clearly saying that you're either with us, with those that are on the right side of history, or those that are not. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think about the Dalai Lama's comments, about Deepak Chopra's comments. Am I making false assumptions? Is my reasoning unguided? Am I not thinking spiritually? Peace out, keep it real. Don't drive and text. Until next time, this is your chocolate Nubian soul brother signing out. Ow!
What is liberty?
What the? Who says you can't build muscle on a vegan diet?
What's it like being a hottie in the vegan community?
There are no political solutions, only technological ones.
The economics of the system don't allow multiple competing systems to survive.
Engineering, technology, these arts of humanity, they are magic.